and again, I want to attribute this to the work that Complete College is doing. That's really based on SREB and other things that have been done over time. So the first bucket is this idea of examining, which is Aaron referenced, new models of performance funding. And I think this is a room where I know you guys understand that concept, but not surprisingly, in higher ed, the whole idea is a little bit anathema still right now. And the fact is, you've got a system nationally that's still based largely on enrollment and not outcomes. And again, as you see this pressure on state appropriations, people are beginning to question whether that's the right approach. And so these slides, by the way, I hope you can read them. The big bucket, if you will, is on the left. And these strategies, which I'll click through as I'm talking, is kind of what, not an exhaustive list of things to consider, but among the things that are being talked about. So on performance funding, in Tennessee last year, our governor worked with the legislature, worked very closely, in fact, with Aaron's friend, our Senate Education Committee Chairman, Dolores Gresham, to really move the funding approach, the system forward in a dramatically different direction. And we had a system that we had called performance funding, but it really wasn't. That's not really what it was. And basically what was happening is we were taking a snapshot, and this is very typical, by the way. We were taking a snapshot of each institution's enrollment on the 14th day of the fall semester, which, by the way, is when enrollment is at its apex, basically. And that became the basis for each institution's funding. And we knew that wasn't right? Because that number is going to change quickly in some places. And after that funding was awarded on that basis, then the institutions could qualify for a little bump of like 5% if they met certain criteria. And that was not performance funding, and we knew that. So what we set out to do, and the governor and the legislature's leadership, was to put a more realistic system in place to pay for what we wanted to incent, including degree production, but also other what we characterize as reasonable performance measures. So we want to increase people students to go forward past their 2-year degree. So we wanted to incent the community colleges to transfer students out up to 4-year institutions. We want 4-year institutions to do a better job working out transfer agreements with the 2-year schools. So we want to incent them to receive transfers in. So there were lots of different ways you can set up performance funding. And some people will say, Tennessee formula is going to end up being too complicated, too many moving parts, and time will tell, and certainly it's a living, breathing apparatus, just like it ought to be anywhere. But in the meantime, so I would say, we're doing interesting things, but we're going to sort of see how that works. In the meantime, there are a handful of states, Indiana, Ohio, Washington, that have been frequently cited as having some well-established, well-thought-out funding approaches based on course and degree completions and achievement of institutional goals, and there's certainly more experts in the room who could talk in more detail about those. But the bottom line is the budget pressures, the situations that we're facing are all causing us to rethink the way we fund higher education. The second big bucket of work is transforming remediation. And the bottom line is you've got large numbers of students, not necessarily in this state, but in a lot of states, who are being admitted who are not ready to do the college level work. Part of this has the fact that you have the incentives all wrong, right? So you've got an enrollment-based system. It can turn into a race to grow the student body at some cost and at some peril, I would add, to the institutions. There are some public institutions out there that instead of making, and again, I'm not saying in this state it's the case, but there are definitely some around the country who instead of making the necessary cuts during the fiscal downturn have made changes in admission policies, in an effort to maintain funding, and they've essentially end up kind of chasing a larger share of a smaller pie. And so that's a very, tough day of reckoning when that happens, and it's beginning to happen. There are some estimates out there that says about 3/4 of the colleges and universities around the country offer some form of remedial education at a cost of something like $2.5 billion with B. So it's clear there's a problem out there. What do you do about it, right? So is the answer not let the kids in, betray your commitment to access? There may be some of that, but in other cases, I think the answer seems to be you try to steer them toward institutions that are better prepared to help them correct. And obviously, high schools, have accountability in all of this. The fact is, the solution probably ends up being some combination of additional focus at the high schools, as well as some more innovative work in the first year of college to help kind of solve this problem. I know Georgia is in the middle of a very focused conversation on remediation right now. That is not uncommon for any state that continues to grapple with standards questions. It is the right area to place your collective focus, and it's important, very important work. I would say there are a handful of states out there, Texas, Kentucky, Virginia, that are creating some transitional courses in math, reading and writing at the high school levels, probably worth looking at. At the post-secondary level, there's also some, I would say, some really innovative work going on in what's sometimes referred to as co-requisite remediation instead of prerequisite. And kind of what that means is something like this. If you're a student who needs help, we're not going to just park you over here in a non-credit bearing course and hope you catch up and let you sit out a semester and hope you don't fall out in the process. Which is kind of how traditional remediation has worked. It's been a little bit disconnect. But instead, we're going to put you with some care in the deep end of the pool and help you swim with proper supports right away. And there are, this is, another kind of emerging area. There's a notable example that Dave and my friend Stan Jones talks about. Sometimes it's a place in Maryland called the Community College of Baltimore County. They have an accelerated learning program that enrolls remedial English students in an English 101 regular course. But it's accompanied by some targeted reinforcement in key areas, and it's got healthy doses of faculty and peer supports. So there's innovative work out there that needs to be built on and expanded. The third, I bumped ahead. What is this? Oh, my slides are out of order. My apologies. So, did everybody get remediation? All right. Well, anyway, the third one involves reducing time to degree. So we talked earlier, about this whole notion of 4-year degrees carrying, a 6-year yardstick in terms of how you measure them. And there are absolutely logical reasons for doing that. You've got more and more students having to work to put themselves through college. That's obviously draws out the time to degree. But the one thing that's pretty clear, just from common sense, you don't even need research really to tell you, is that this idea of life getting in the way. And the bottom line is, if you are a student, the longer you are in school, the less likely you are to finish your degree, right? The longer you spend, the less likely you are to finish. And there are so many things that get in the way. It could be a job that's a good job, but maybe, not the better job that you could get with a better credential. Marriage, academic fatigue, is probably debt, finances, all those things get in the way. So kind of what is the strategy for improving time to degree? And there are, again, another area where there's some basic strategies that are being talked about nationally. One really logical one, which we're looking at in Tennessee right now, is basically making better use of summer school. This is a time where a lot of institutions have excess physical capacity. They literally can take more students in than they can in the summer than they can in the spring or fall, and it can help smooth out enrollment pressures, and it helps, again, kind of reduce the amount of time year over year that student is in school. We talked earlier about transfers, ensuring more seamless transfers. That is an oldie but a goodie. But everybody has heard these horror stories. It might have happened to you or your kid or your neighbor's kid about kids losing credits, sometimes big blocks of credits, when they try to do something as basic as transfer from one institution to another. And so those issues have got to be worked out in collaboration with the institutions. Making better use of technology. It's important in a state like Georgia where you've got some significant distance learning opportunities, right? Not challenges, opportunities. And then there's a pretty basic, underrated strategy that we use in high school all the time, but we really don't use much in college, which is take attendance, right? So it's an odd thing that not every student will respond, but a lot of them will respond if they know their presence is being missed. And I would say, one idea that's really gaining steam in the national picture is let's have a really meaningful conversation about reducing excess credits. Give students better guidance. earlier in their college careers, so they're not enrolling in courses that end up being wasted time for them and wasted costs for the institutions and taxpayers. There's actually a study in Florida that found excess credit hours were costing the state about $62 million a year, and kind of going in and looking at where there are the opportunities to reduce that kind of waste, if that's the right word, is important. And then I would just further add is just, as somebody who just finished paying off his student loans a few years ago, there's this whole notion of debt. And the longer a student remains in school, the more likely that kid is going to have, and their family is going to have to pay more and end up with more debt at the end of the process. So again, time is money. I know that sounds trite, but there are really so many good reasons to focus on time to degree. So let's go back on track here. Transformer mediation, we talked about that. All right, this is the final slide. The fourth bucket is looking at structure, top to bottom. And there are some, again, really simple ideas out there that are being looked at, including making better use of what are called cohort-based and block scheduling, cohort-based programs and block scheduling. I think when you move through a program with your peers or your cohorts, you obviously create a support network that helps with overall success. Some college programs are built that way already, many are not. Block scheduling is a strategy that might not be a fan favorite among faculty who like flexible schedules, but it can put more predictability into the system and the day-to-day, week-to-week calendar for those students who are the real consumers here. And I would say the basic idea is, instead of taking block scheduling, instead of taking a class at 8 a.m. on Wednesday, then another class at 1 p.m., and then another class at 3 p.m., and having all that downtime in the middle. Block scheduling really is about, you go in at 9, you stay there until 2, you get them all knocked out and lined up, maybe you take a break in between. And that, bottom line, that makes it easier for students who have jobs, who have commitments, and who need that predictability in their schedules, and that helps with all of those things. And I will take 1 minute to brag on our Tennessee Technology Centers, which do one-year degree programs. We've got in Tennessee some community colleges that are sitting on some truly abysmal completion rates: 11%, 15%, 22%. Fortunately, it goes up from there. But meanwhile, we've got about 24 of these little technology centers that are humming along with an average completion rate of about 75%. Okay? So part of that certainly has to do with the fact that it's a shorter program, easier to get in and out, life doesn't get in the way as much. A lot of cases, you've got employers who are waiting on those technology center students at the receiving end, so that's an added incentive for them to hustle and get through. But part of it, frankly, just has to do with structure. These institutions are heavy users of block scheduling, cohort-based programs. They teach subjects like math within the context of the job that they're training for. So it's not just math, but it's math for machine tool technology, which is a different proposition, for a student learner or an adult learner who's going back for retraining. And remediation is embedded in what they do. And when a student walks in the door, they lay out the path for them to follow that will lead them to a certificate by a certain time. And it's a very prescribed approach. So obviously, not everybody wants or needs a situation that's that heavily prescribed. But when you're looking at numbers like 15% over here and 75% over there, it makes you stop and take inventory of what can we do better, what can we learn from these places, and maybe the answer is that a little structure, can go a long way.